good morning, and welcome to the February 2022 NOAC Chamber Focus Series event. My name is Cindy Holzheimer. I'm the President and CEO of the Northern Ohio Area Chambers of Commerce, and we're very excited to have you with us today. I'd also like to introduce you to our new program director. I'm going to put her on the spot, but I'm not. Karen Schaefer, who is on with us today. Karen comes to us as the former executive director of the Heights Hillcrest Regional Chamber, and she brings with her over a decade of chamber experience, and we're very excited to have her as part of the team. So Karen, wave at us. I'd also like to recognize some of the peers that we have here at NOAC, and that's our executive team. So you can see them here on the screen. Karen is our new program director. She actually comes from a board position at NOAC, and then also Rachel is on. She's our at-large position as well. All right. Well, so this morning we are joined by Kyle Petty, who is the Government Relations Director at CHW Advisors. Kyle has spent over a decade developing strong relationships with the Ohio General Assembly and numerous government agencies and stakeholder groups across the state. These relationships, paired with his intricate knowledge of state government, allow him to offer a high level of advocacy for clients at his firm. Now, Kyle has a very extensive and very impressive resume in the legislative work, and I will let him elaborate on that if he wants to. But one thing I did want to mention is that Kyle is actually also a practicing attorney, which is always a fun tidbit. He is a founding partner of the Petty Devlin Law Group, and their areas of practice include estate planning, contract law, employment law, family law, and personal injury. So without further ado, I would like to turn things over to Kyle Petty.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Cindy. I appreciate the opportunity to present to this group here, and I really appreciate NOAC's participation in Ohio Business for Immigration Solutions, which is really what brings me here today with you all. I'm just going to share my screen here really quickly and bring my wonderful PowerPoint up here. So, all right. So we are Ohio. I'm representing Ohio Business for Immigration Solutions. So I am a statewide organizer in that capacity for this group. And so really what OBIS is for short, we are now a statewide coalition of 74 members as of today. And we have a broad range of membership, including individual businesses, trade associations, chambers of commerce, which really are our backbone, quite candidly. I would say around half our membership consists of various chambers of commerce across the state. We love chambers of commerce. That's why I love working with this group here. And we also have some economic development groups. And so really what we are is we are the only statewide coalition of businesses that we look at immigration reform as a workforce issue. So we don't focus on borders or anything of that nature. We only work on legal immigration with an eye towards workforce. As I'm sure you're hearing from many of your members, it is almost impossible to find native Ohioans to fill some of these job vacancies. And now we're getting to the point where a lot of our members really across the state are looking at alternative sources of workforce, and immigrants are actually becoming a very popular alternative for folks. So the issue we have is that the current immigration system doesn't really work for businesses. It's kind of bureaucratic. There's lots of red tape. It's not very transparent. And so what we do is we help engage with elected officials and different policymakers at the federal and state and even local level to really let folks know that immigrants are a viable workforce alternative for businesses, and quite frankly, they're here now in the state, and they actually are contributing in a really bevy of ways to really improve Ohio's economy in very different levels. And so one of the neat things about our organization, and really what I've found to be the most fascinating thing in working with this subject matter, is we partner with an organization called the American Immigration Council. And so they are a research and advocacy institution that really shares our same goal, that immigration reform is a workforce issue and it should be treated as such. And so instead of blabbering on about it like I do, they actually use their data to kind of make the argument. And so they actually look at census data, job board postings. They have incredible stats about the number of job vacancies out there and how many immigrants fill those job vacancies and things like that. They also look at the economic data. So as you can see here, here is kind of an overview of Ohio generally with the economic impact of immigrants. So as you can see, I want to draw your attention to two different statistics. So one, They make up about 5% of the population, which I kind of thought was more than what, I would have assumed just, from walking around and seeing folks. But they also are 29,257 entrepreneurs. So the statistics that the AIC has around immigrant entrepreneurs are very fascinating. So immigrants, when they come over here, they're twice as likely to start a job or start a new business than native Ohioans, which obviously, being you guys are chambers of commerce, those are new members that you can tap into. And they bring new ideas and different cultures to different cities in Ohio. And that's been a really, really big impact for Ohio in terms of its spending power and really our tax base. So we've really been great to kind of learn more about their economic impact through the American Immigration Council's data. So here's another statistic that I think was just incredibly fascinating. So they can also break down the data by their occupation. And so we think this is very important as we kind of look at different industries that are hurting in the job market and really can't find anybody to work. So as you can kind of see, they either come, most immigrants come in, they're at a very high level of the working age. So I think over 75% are between the ages of 18 and 50. So they either come in and do kind of manual labor jobs, as you can see, animal production, aquaculture. That's the number one industry they fill. But they also do a lot of science and research and development services. And one stat that's actually not on here that I think is incredible, especially given the global pandemic we find ourselves in, is that current day right now, over 1 in 4 physicians in the state of Ohio is foreign born. So, folks either come in and they work in the manual labor jobs, or actually a lot of them end up working the high paying, high wage, high skill jobs. And that obviously translates to their tax and spending power too. So as you can see, they have a pretty significant impact on the state and local tax base with a pretty high immigrant household income and total spending power. So that's a little bit about the data of immigrants and their impact in Ohio. And now I want to kind of talk about really more of the advocacy side of OBIS and what we do. I know Cindy and Rachel are both here on the call, and they've participated in some of our roundtable discussions with members of Congress. But OBIS also provides a lot of value to members, which is kind of the reason why I want to speak to this group today is we need your membership. We need your voices, we need your stories, because as you can see, these 3 bills here are just an example of 3 bills we kind of track for our membership. And we provide monthly updates that kind of summarizes and kind of really simplifies a lot of this immigration policy. So you can provide an update onto your membership about what's happening at the congressional level through your membership in Ohio Business for Immigration Solutions. So these 3 bills here are 3 that I think kind of speak to our policy priorities, which I'll get to in the next slide. But as you can see, they're looking at things like streamlining the application process for visa reform. That's a huge issue because right now you have to fill out 1 application for 1 worker. And if you're, it's like a small landscaping business, you're probably going to use 5 to 10 workers. So filling it out 5 to 10 times, you have to hire an attorney like me, which, unfortunately my profession is good at squeezing pennies out of people and becomes very expensive. So we want to try to find a way where the average business owner can access the system, can apply, and then can get their worker in a timely and orderly fashion. So that's kind of what this Farm Workforce Modernization Act looks to do. There's also more for the high sector folks. There's caps on countries for visas, which, as you can imagine, we get a lot of folks from India, a lot of folks from China, and obviously, they cap them. And so people that otherwise could be eligible to come in and contribute to our economy in a variety of ways are capped simply because of their country of origin. So I don't think that's really a very fair policy. So the Citizenship Act of 2020 will change that, as well as increase the cap. These caps on green cards and visas have been around for 20 years. As you can imagine, our economy has shifted vastly in that time. And that doesn't really reflect, how immigrants really fit into the workforce right now, particularly in Ohio, where agriculture is one of the predominant industries in the state. I think the visa cap is a 60,000 annually, which, as you can imagine, that doesn't really begin to fill Ohio's job needs, let alone the whole nation. So that's something we're looking at to do here in the H-2B Returning Worker Exception Act. And that's actually co-sponsored by Dave Joyce from Northeast Ohio, who's been a great partner with our coalition, and Congressman Steve Shabbat from Cincinnati, Ohio, also been a great partner. And so we've worked closely with their offices. We've met with them, met with the congressman personally. And this bill is excellent because it allows people who have been around and came through the visa program for multiple years to kind of go through what I like to call an express lane because you've already seen them. They've been here. They've done their background checks. You know who they are. So they don't really need to jump through all the hoops that everybody else, should be doing. That are first time applicants. So these are examples of common sense bills that we track. And the reason we track those is because I'm going to skip the slide here. Now, there you go. There's policy priorities. So we track those because they're part of our policy priorities. So one of the things that I'm really proud about our coalition is that we are completely member driven. And so what that means is we only work on issues that are important to you as a member. So all of these policy priorities you see on the screen, those came from members. Those weren't made up by me. They weren't made up by the Immigration Council. Those came from actual OBIS members. And ironically enough, they were all pretty consensus issues. We surveyed all of our folks, and they pretty much came back and said, we need to reform the visa program to work for our agricultural folks. We need to reform the green card system to help keep some of these high skilled workers here in Ohio, particularly post graduation. We have almost 30,000 international students in Ohio right now, and those are folks that are paying taxes. They know Ohio, but we do a really bad job of keeping them after graduation, and they're going into STEM fields most likely or not, which is what we really need in Ohio right now. So these are our three policy priorities. We're really excited about them. This year, we're really going to focus a lot on two separate issues, which is high skilled visa reform. So that's like going to be your computer technicians, your software developers, your physicians, your any kind of high level medical people, and we're also going to look at occupational license reform. So we've heard a lot of stories about folks that come over here and they might be a barber back home in their home country. Well, their training and their credentials do not match up with the Ohio Cosmetology Board. And so they have to basically start all over again. Or we've heard stories of doctors who come over here from Brazil, which is a pretty civilized country, and they've actually had to start over and become janitors while they go back to medical school to relearn all the things that they've had to learn. Now, I'm not saying that we should have a one-for-one parity or full reciprocity, but there's got to be a middle ground there. We can try to look at some of their credentials, on an individual basis, and really not try to promote what we call in our coalition the brain drain, where we have folks come over and they have a lot of skills, but our licensing system kind of makes them have to take lower level jobs, and we lose that expertise and that ability. So I will go back here to the main thrust of why I'm here. How can you get involved? So as Cindy can attest to, and Rachel, we try to have roundtable discussions with members of Congress probably every other month. We're probably going to try to ramp it up here being an election year, because it's really important to convey your members' stories. I've worked in politics my whole entire life, and I will tell you that the personal stories are so impactful to members, particularly in election years. I think they don't want to hear from me, the lobbyist that kind of comes in and talks about this stuff for a living. They want to hear from the business owner that can't fulfill a contract as a manufacturer because they can't find enough workers to meet their contractual obligations. They want to hear about the landscaper who bought equipment and was ready to go and excited to get their workers to the visa program, but they can't because they hit the cap, and then they have to return all that equipment. Those are the stories they want to hear, but I don't have those. You and your members have those, and we need to find a way to get those to us, that we can then put you in a room with a member of Congress, hopefully your member of Congress, and then you can tell them that story. And we can start to slowly begin to change the narrative that immigration reform is not solely a border issue. It's very much a workforce issue. And unfortunately, it's the issue that's very important to Ohio business owners. And so that's when I'm really making a plea here to you and your members that we need your membership. The more chambers, particularly in different geographical regions of Ohio, the more voices and stories we can get, the better our coalition is going to be. And the stronger we can advocate for workforce-related immigration reform, which will lead to more workers in Ohio, which will ultimately lead to less job vacancies in a greater and more economic prosperous Ohio. So that is my plea to you guys. I would love to talk to anybody you have that would be interested in joining. Welcome you to visit our website at ohcompact.org to learn more about our organization and see our member list. You can kind of see who is part of our coalition, and see if it's right fit for you. So with that, there is my contact information. As Cindy and Rachel can attest to, I send emails and very accessible at all hours of the night. So do not feel free to bother me anytime you would like. But with that, I will turn it over to questions or if anybody needs anything else.
Great. Thank you. Very, short and sweet, which is really great. I do have one question though. So if I am a business who didn't realize that I could hire someone, in these particular brackets, how do I go about doing that? Where do I find these type of workers?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I wish I had a very simple answer for you, but unfortunately the process itself is very complex, and that kind of leads us to why we're trying to seek reform. So I had the same question when I first started working this issue, because I work, politics, you kind of deal things at 30,000 foot level. I'm like, can you give me a one pager on how do you hire someone through the visa process? I was laughed out of the room. Like, well, that's not that simple. And I'm like, well, that's the whole point, right? If I'm an attorney, I study laws, I read laws all the time. If I can understand it, how's a small business that might not have enough time to really kind of look at the process? How are they gonna, be able to understand that process? So reforms like the Farm Workforce Modernization Act are trying to make it easier to kind of apply. They're going to try to put it all online so you can kind of help. There's easy helpful ways to do it. 'Cause right now it's very form based, which we all love government forms. Those are a real treat to fill out. But you essentially have to fill out a form right now that certifies that you've posted the job. You can't find native Ohioan to work and fill the job. That goes to the Department of Labor. They certify that. Then your application goes to the Department of State and Customs Immigration Services. They do background checks on your worker. They try to figure out where you're at in this lottery because they have more applicants for the visas than they actually have slots. So they put you into this dreaded lottery system. And so you'll get put in pot E, for example, which our folks tell me you're not going to get anybody. So that's kind of how the process works. If you're lucky to get a worker approved, then you actually have one ready to come in. They then have to go through the U.S. consulate in their home country to make sure they can get in and fill the paperwork, get their passport stamped. Then they come into the country. So as you can imagine, not a very efficient process, not a very quick process, which if you're a seasonal worker, that doesn't really work for your business very well. So it's a long answer to your simple question.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. So, like Kyle was saying, so they, definitely are looking for that support from other groups. I know NOAC belongs to this particular, with OBIS, I know Rachel does as well. And so you said ohcompact.org, that's where they go to find out more information about this particular initiative. I think that for me, it was just some of the startling things like that $6 billion in taxes stood out to me. And that you said there are 30,000 international students in Ohio. I think that's incredible. And,
Yep.
And again, what are we doing to keep them here? It's the same thing as even, our high schools that we have, for each of our chambers. How are we keeping those students in our areas, that type of thing. So it's always fascinating to me.
I think most of them are a case if they're college. I have a question. I feel like I've come in the middle of this whole conversation. So Kyle, can you what was happening in this workforce that led to building OBIS, and how long has OBIS been around?
Sure. So that's a good question. We started in the fall 2 years ago, or well, it would have been right after the election. So it would have been 2021. So we started in December of 2021. So we are just over a year old. So we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, December 6th of last year. And so really how OBIS came about is the partner organization, American Immigration Council, so they kind of work with different state coalitions because they're very business focused, and they have a whole arm. It's called the Global Talent Chamber Network, and they will do different research briefs for different chambers about what the economic impact of immigrants are in their geographic area. So for example, we're working with the Youngstown Chamber and the Findlay Hancock Chamber to do such a report. So they kind of have been loosely working in Ohio for several years. And then they came to my organization to put together this coalition of businesses. And the reason they want to work with businesses is because we're at the point now where people are desperate. They can't find anybody. And so it's really just been a workforce issue. So people go through, they look, like as Cindy mentioned, they go to high schools, go to career tech folks. They try to get those folks to come fill their gaps in their employment. but they're kind of at the point where they've exhausted that pool. That pool doesn't want to work anymore. And so now they're at the point, well, what else can I do? And we've actually kind of found a lot of folks that have really tapped into the immigrant population. That's kind of what's, spurred our coalition on, is that we have a lot of these good success stories now of, warehouses in Columbus, for example, that have, really saved their business and couldn't function without immigrants coming in. And then we wanted to kind of spread that, that knowledge really across the state to folks that immigrants are a really viable alternative. The system right now doesn't really lend itself to that. It's very complex. And if we think if it can be changed and simplified, some common sense things like some of the bills I spoke about earlier, if you've been here for 5 or 6 seasons, it's the same person. You don't need to jump through all the hoops. That's just ridiculous. So things like that we're trying to change to make it easier so folks can actually tap into this pool of workers, and then fill some of those workforce gaps. So really it just comes back to just a workforce issue, which unfortunately is plaguing the state of Ohio, but it's really helping us kind of get our message across, because folks are at the point now where they'll take anybody that I think they can fill the job.
Right. And then what happens is you get a warm body and you do all the training and then they leave.
Correct.
I've seen that happen. So how much of this is really workforce? Chambers are non-political.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of this is a political basis, and how much of it is definitely the workforce? Because I can see the workforce being very, very I can't think of the word, but wonderful, because we're all having a problem. You see help wanted signs everywhere. But when it comes, how much of it is political?
Sure. And that's also a good question too. I mean, we are, I left this term out on my description of OBIS, but we're bipartisan. So we work closely with both political parties. And actually, we've really been very blessed in Ohio with our congressional delegation. So I mentioned Congressman Joyce and Shabbat, they're both Republicans. But we have a very good relationship with Sherrod Brown's, their Senator Sherrod Brown's office. We met with Congresswoman Beatty's office. So we do meet with both political parties. And actually, we're to the point now where with Senator Brown's office, where they were voting on the reconciliation package, and there were some immigration provisions that were in there at one point in time, and they actually reached out to us to get our opinion on it. Do we support these provisions in the bill? So we do work with both parties, and I think that's what's really been neat about our issue. I think you really hit on it. People are now, they don't really care about the political issues of immigration. It's just, can you get a worker in here, a body that we need to fill our job? They don't really care about whether Republican, Democrat, who supports both. And really a lot of these bills that I mentioned, they're both bipartisan. So, the Returning Worker Exception Act, Dave Joyce co-sponsored that with Congressman Cuellar out of Texas, who's Democrat. So, these bills are all really bipartisan, and it's really, and knock on wood, one of the few issues I think that we have both political parties agree on in Congress. It's just, ciphering through all the rhetoric and things like that. But I think the more stories and the more members we have in our coalition, I've really found, I'll take Rachel's, congressman, for example, Jim Jordan. He's about as conservative as you can get. But I had a really good conversation with his office about how immigration at the border is a separate issue, but they've actually had stories from their business owners in their districts that they rented farm equipment, they bought hotel rooms because they were expecting to get a worker through the visa program, and they were denied. And then this business is out that money, and they're out that worker. What are they going to do? And so I was really encouraged by that, because it's not really a political issue in our mind. It's just purely numbers and economics and workforce. And that's what we try to tell folks. But, it's been a long journey to break down some of those barriers. But the more voice we have, like I really go back to these chambers, right? You guys are really the silver bullet for a lot of this workforce stuff. You guys are, you said you're nonpartisan, and you really have good connection on both sides of the aisle, but you really have a good pulse in the business community. And that's really what we lack, here in Columbus, quite candidly, is what's going on out in the rest of Ohio. And we need your stories. We need your members' stories. And we can uplift those in a variety of ways. We do op-eds with members. We can basically help you write an op-ed. We place all your op-eds for you. We provide you information. And one of the things, and Cindy, I'm really kicking myself in the butt for not mentioning this off the, at the beginning of the presentation, but we are free to join, 100% free. So you get all of this information, all of this access, all these resources for free. So I tell folks there is really no downside to joining, but the benefits are numerous. So We're really excited. I can't speak highly enough of NOAC and, and Rachel too, in your chamber and joining us. It's really been really great, a great partnership. And we wouldn't really be as successful we were without you guys and your support. So thank you very much for that, and look forward to changing the hearts and minds together in the future.
I just want to throw out there that one of the big reasons we have a legislative committee here, and we have been following the Farm Workforce Modernization Act for, it feels like, years. And to have somebody else be able to watch that and send me what's going on, it takes one. We all know how busy chamber people are, and sometimes if you can get with an organization that can help you with one thing on your plate that gives you 10 more minutes in your day, it helps. It's really hard for us and anybody, if you don't have like a big pack in your chamber. We're very rural here in Fremont. We really only have a legislative committee. So to have that backup come in on things as important as this, and for me to know, okay, I don't have to worry about following the Farm Modernization Workforce Act. I really wish they'd name that something else, like give it a nickname or something. I've been struggling with that for 2.5 years. To have somebody else to know, okay, I don't have to worry about trying to hunt this stuff down, see what's going on. I know I'm going to get something from Kyle or OBIS as a general, and they're going to fill me in on it, so then I can take it to my legislative committee and we can keep on top of these things a little better than what we've done in the past, because we have that backup and we have that help. So thank you and your entire organization for that. It's making at least my life a little easier when it comes to the legislative committee and the things that we want to accomplish through that committee.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad my email, I always worry that I'm bombarding everybody with emails, so I know you guys are very busy, and I try to make it as easy and beneficial as possible. So I really appreciate hearing that.
I'd have to say I'm not seeing as many of those. So make sure that we're on on that list. I am getting the emails for the Hydrogen Hub project, but not so much on the immigration side. So I want to make sure that we are receiving those.
Yep.
And that, I think that goes to, back to, definitely go to that Ohio, ohcompact.org and sign up for that. I know we have 2 other chambers that are listening, the Warrensville Heights Chamber and the Port Clinton Chamber. And then others that I know are going to be receiving the feedback or the playback of this. And I think, just really making sure that we are doing what we can to follow these particular stories. And like to Rachel's point, we can't all get on and follow every bill. That would just be crazy. That's not always what we do. But I think, as chambers, some of our, some are pretty rural, some are pretty small as far as our chambers go. I actually know of maybe only 1 or 2 of our 126 chambers that actually have a PAC. So that is actually rare in our instance. But advocacy is always something that I think we kind of always skirt away from, because we feel like it's a little too political, and that's not the case. As C6 organizations, we can do lobbying, we can do advocacy, that type of thing, as long as we're keeping it pretty neutral and, keeping
Right.
it. I do believe our lobbying is unlimited. It's like a C3, you cannot, I think it's a very limited amount that you can do, but we can do some lobbying in different types of things. So, different things that are going on, especially like up here in Cuyahoga County. The plastic bag whole thing actually slid and has now actually been approved, and nobody really ever heard about it. So, eliminating that plastic bag type of thing. So things that your members want to know about, but keeping up to date with that. And that's definitely where Kyle's group can come in. You do a lot more advocacy other than immigration. Do you do other types of lobbying and different types of advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, our firm, we have around 40 clients. We do all sorts of issues. I mean, one of the other things that we work on too that, is really kind of an emerging, but I think a very interesting client to work on is hydrogen. So a similar coalition to Ohio Business for Immigration Solutions, so free to join, and kind of the same setup in terms of, we provide information, we provide updates, but there was $8 billion, and that's billion with a B, in the recent infrastructure bill for these 4 clean regional hydrogen hubs across the country rather. And so obviously we would like Ohio to be selected as one of those sites to receive the investment, but also as we kind of seen with the Intel announcement, hydrogen is a very rapidly advancing and alternative energy source. that is relatively green in terms of its, how it releases carbon. I'm you're seeing how limited my scientific knowledge is of all this stuff here, but it's a really interesting fossil fuel alternative in terms of, they're using it in buses up in Canton. They're one of the first adopters of hydrogen buses. It's very efficient and very clean burning energy. And Ohio actually has a lot of opportunities for hydrogen because we are a big natural gas producing state, and there are shale developments and things like that. So we are putting together a coalition to help Ohio advocate to be selected as a clean regional hydrogen hub. So these hubs are essentially distribution, end use, manufacturing, production for hydrogen. Because I think the federal government and this administration is really prioritizing hydrogen as an alternative energy source. And luckily, Ohio is very uniquely situated to receive one of those sites. So we're putting together a same coalition. That website is the number 2 hub.org. And so we'd love to have you check that out as well and join. We have about 75 members. And that's really ranging from, there are a couple of chambers of commerce, but it's a lot of energy organizations and users. It's a lot of steel manufacturers and the manufacturing base in Ohio. That's something also we're really excited about too, because I think, Intel has kind of shown that Ohio can be a site selected for, something that's not just the Rust Belt flyover state. We actually are a very big manufacturing state. We have a proud history of manufacturing, and hydrogen. If we get this hub, we'll really secure Ohio in its future as a leader in hydrogen. Which I think, and the more I learn about this stuff, and the folks we talk to, they're much smarter than me. They believe hydrogen is kind of the way this is going to go. Not everybody can drive electric cars. That's not feasible for everybody else, but hydrogen is a alternative energy source that it might be viable here in the near future. And we want to make sure Ohio is a leader in that industry. And this hub will kind of go a long way to that. So that's some of the other neat things working on here at CHW. But thanks for bringing it up, Cindy. I'm sure I've bombarded your members with those emails as well too. So I promise I'm not trying to sell you guys like an extended warranty on your car insurance or something. These are all very legit coalitions, and we really appreciate the support on this. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I wanted to real quickly, I am going to share real quick. Hopefully everybody can see this. I have a hard time with my sharing the screen type of things here, but just kind of to move forward. So on March 17th is actually our next Chamber Focus event. So we are welcoming Kathy Height. She is, she calls herself the promoter of good change. And she is going to be talking about time, talent, and treasure. You're driving your board engagement and really focusing on how would you rate the engagement of your board members? What influences your board directors to be engaged? And are there ways to measure their engagement? So those are some things that she's going to talk about and coming up on the next Chamber Focus series. So I just really wanted to thank Kyle again for being on. We really appreciate that.